all along this fence, all along there.
Every spring and summer,
all this grass back in here.
For 11 years,
back over by those steam lines, of course.
John Vickery's main job at the city of Hamilton,
everything on this side of the road,
was to kill weeds and grass here at the now closed Hamilton City Power Plant.
We used to spray all over this area.
And the product he used?
We used Roundup.
The Hamilton Public Works Director tells me Roundup is no longer used, though he says he doesn't know why the city switched. In the spring of 2006, John was no longer out here battling weeds. He was in here at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center fighting cancer. When they said you had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, what was your reaction?
Shock, disbelief.
Surgeons removed 2/3 of John's right lung, and he retired much earlier than he had planned.
The type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma I got is incurable, and basically they're just waiting for it to come back.
John moved to Florida, but couldn't stop looking back.
And I wondered if it might be exposure to anything at work, but I didn't know.
Then 2 years ago, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer, or IARC, published this 92-page document concluding the main ingredient in Roundup, glyphosate, is, quote, probably carcinogenic to humans, and it found a positive association for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Does the main ingredient in Roundup cause cancer?
No, Duane, it doesn't.
A vice president of Monsanto, the maker of Roundup, sat down with me in St. Louis, vigorously defending Roundup and disagreeing with IARC's conclusion.
And Duane, this is not a study. This is an opinion piece.
I reached out to IARC 3 times. The agency has yet to respond. John and dozens of other cancer victims and their families are now plaintiffs in this lawsuit filed in St. Louis against Monsanto, claiming Roundup caused their non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
I do believe it did, yes.
In the suit, John's attorney states John's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a direct and proximate result of using Roundup. How many John Vickerys are out there?
There are so many John Vickerys out there. There are thousands of John Vickerys out there.
Robin Greenwald, a former federal environmental prosecutor, spoke to me from her office in New York. How sure are you that Roundup is that dangerous?
I mean, I am quite sure that Roundup is dangerous to human health and the environment.
The lawsuit and others are all rooted in that IARC conclusion that there is a probable link between glyphosate exposure and cancer.
The proof is more likely than not, which is somewhat over 50%. So a probable human carcinogen is pretty strong.
I disagree with Ms. Greenwald entirely.
Back in St. Louis, Scott Partridge, Monsanto's vice president of global strategies, defended Roundup.
It will do no harm. No, it is not. Glyphosate is not a carcinogen, Duane.
Partridge attacked IARC's findings as non-scientific, saying more than 700 studies have been conducted on the health effects around the world.
Not a single one of those studies over that 40-year period of time has found glyphosate to be a carcinogen.
U.S. EPA has approved Roundup as safe for use for decades. Last year, EPA published this report, again affirming Roundup is safe, stating the main ingredient, glyphosate, is not likely to be carcinogenic to humans. Partridge says IARC is too quick to make a cancer connection.
Of the products they have examined in their years of existence, they have found every single one other than one to be associated with cancer in one form or another.
Indeed, the IARC list does include things like red meat, listed just like glyphosate as a probable carcinogen, and alcohol, which is listed as a known carcinogen. John Vickery's lawyer defends IARC.
It has an incredible reputation. Monsanto is clearly trying right now to change that.
And Greenwald says there are many other scientific studies that question the safety of Roundup.
The epidemiology that has built over the course of years about Roundup is part of the reason why I and other lawyers who are doing this case are so confident that we are right, that the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma of our clients was caused by exposure to Roundup.
While John Vickery believes there is a link,
Do you believe that?
Yes, I do.
the question about a cancer connection to Roundup will likely be decided in court, where a lucrative brand and a powerful corporation
And if it causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, it changes the game big time for Monsanto.
as well as science itself, would all be on trial. What do you say to John?
I am so sorry he's ill. Cancer is a horrible, horrible disease. I regret that he's been led to believe it's been caused by his use of Roundup, because there is no scientific or medical evidence to support that.
And by the way, that Monsanto vice president knows more than a little bit about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. He says his mother died from it. We were surprised to learn the final product, Roundup itself, has not been tested. Roundup. It's the most popular weed and grass killer in the country. Effective.
Effective, very effective.
Bringing in billions of dollars each year for the maker, Monsanto, according to the company's annual reports.
Certainly Roundup is a profitable product.
But concerns continue being raised about Roundup's safety, fueled by this 92-page document published by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, or IARC. IARC concludes glyphosate, the main ingredient in Roundup, is, quote, probably carcinogenic to humans, and that there is a positive association with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Does the main ingredient in Roundup cause cancer?
No, Duane, it doesn't.
At Monsanto headquarters in St. Louis, Vice President Scott Partridge was adamant, telling me more than 700 tests and studies over 4 decades prove glyphosate and Roundup are safe. U.S. EPA has approved Roundup as safe for use for decades. And last year, EPA published this report, again affirming Roundup is safe, stating the main ingredient, glyphosate, is not likely to be carcinogenic to humans.
It will do no harm. No, it is not. Glyphosate is not a carcinogen, Duane.
But in a 2003 internal Monsanto email obtained by Local 12 from court documents, Monsanto's lead toxicologist, Dr. Donna Farmer, wrote, quote, "You cannot say Roundup is not a carcinogen. We have not done the necessary testing on the formulation to make that statement." You agree with the quote?
That's an accurate, yes, it's an accurate quote from the email.
What don't I know about that?
Dr. Farmer, she's a fantastically talented scientist, and she was being a scientist. In 2003, she was technically correct when she made that statement.
The reason that statement is technically correct, Partridge says, is because the individual ingredients like glyphosate and surfactants, those are the detergents that break down the wax on the leaves, have been approved after rigorous testing in the U.S. and around the world, while the final product, Roundup itself, has not. Has Roundup as the brand Roundup been tested?
No,
Roundup?
no. The surfactant does not cause cancer. The two of them together, two negatives, cannot make a positive, and the EPA confirmed this, and that was the end of the story.
Robin Greenwald, a former federal environmental prosecutor, says it's just the beginning.
If they are so sure that Roundup is safe, why don't they test it?
Greenwald is the lead attorney on this lawsuit filed against Monsanto in St. Louis, claiming the main ingredient in Roundup caused non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
I have no doubt that in time, hopefully very soon, it will be clear and open and obvious to everybody that Roundup is not safe like Monsanto claims it is, and that it can cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
John Vickery, a former Hamilton, Ohio city worker, is a plaintiff in that lawsuit.
Your name's on a lawsuit,
Yes, sir.
which means you believe it.
I do believe it.
While the public works director says the city of Hamilton no longer uses Roundup, John says the city did when he worked there.
Use Roundup.
For 11 years in the spring and summer, John says his main job was spraying Roundup. In 2006, John was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
The type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma I got is incurable.
Back in St. Louis, I told Monsanto's VP about John's case. What do you say to John?
I am so sorry he's ill. Cancer is a horrible, horrible disease. I regret that he's been led to believe it's been caused by his use of Roundup, because there is no scientific or medical evidence to support that.
While that agency, IARC, found a probable link between glyphosate and cancer, only one state in the U.S., California, requires a cancer warning on Roundup's label. To the untrained eye, this field of soybeans near Lebanon, Ohio,
There we go. There is a soybean.
appears to be the same as what farmers like Amy Sig Davis
We're American farmers.
have planted for generations.
And I'm going to farm this farm till I die.
But over the past 2 decades, there has been a revolution in these fields centered on one product. I say Roundup, what do you say?
No weeds.
Davis, like most farmers across the country, shifted from expensive and time-consuming plowing and cultivation
Instead of planting our beans in rows this wide, we're able to drill the beans into the soil.
and now uses only Roundup. But that's only part of the picture here.
We have used Roundup since the mid-90s when Roundup Ready soybeans first became available.
Monsanto states these Roundup Ready beans are genetically modified to survive Roundup's main ingredient, glyphosate. The plants thrive, the weeds die, and yields increase.
How much of a difference are we talking about?
Probably another 30%.
That's an extra 100 acres worth of food from this 300-acre field.
It has been a godsend.
But lawsuits across the country are now questioning the safety of Roundup. The World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer, or IARC, published this 92-page document concluding the main ingredient in Roundup, glyphosate, is, quote, probably carcinogenic to humans. And it found a positive association in cases of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And that has triggered a growing number of lawsuits.
But your name's on a lawsuit,
Yes, sir.
which means you believe it.
I do believe it.
John Vickery, a former Hamilton City worker, is one of thousands now suing Monsanto, claiming Roundup caused his cancer.
The type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma I got is incurable.
At this now closed power plant, John says, he sprayed one product
We used Roundup.
every spring and summer for 11 years. What do you say to John?
I am so sorry he's ill. Cancer is a horrible, horrible disease. I regret that he's been led to believe it's been caused by his use of Roundup, because there is no scientific or medical evidence to support that.
At Monsanto headquarters in St. Louis, Vice President Scott Partridge sat down with me, insisting Roundup is safe. Does the main ingredient in Roundup cause cancer?
No, Duane, it doesn't.
Partridge pointed to more than 700 studies that prove that, including this EPA paper published last year, affirming Roundup is safe, stating the main ingredient, glyphosate, is not likely to be carcinogenic to humans.
It will do no harm. No, it is not. Glyphosate is not a carcinogen, Duane.
While questions about the science and safety of glyphosate and Roundup will likely be decided in court, Partridge says he's concerned about what would happen if Roundup is removed out here in the field.
We have 2 million children dying every year in this world from malnutrition. This is not the time to take out of their hands an incredibly safe and effective tool that has proven to increase yields. That's simply wrong, Duane.
And that's completely false and frankly irresponsible.
Scott Faber is a vice president of the Environmental Working Group in Washington, D.C.
It's a desperate ploy by Monsanto to defend a technology that, while initially promising for farmers who were looking for ways to avoid using different herbicides to tackle weeds, has turned out to instead have caught farmers on a chemical treadmill.
That chemical treadmill, Faber says, now includes superweeds that are resistant to Roundup.
They have no choice but to use more and more glyphosate as the weeds grow more and more resistant.
According to a 2016 study by Environmental Sciences Europe, since 1996, 18.9 billion pounds of glyphosate have been sprayed onto the world's fields. That's a half pound of glyphosate for every cultivated acre in the world.
This is the most heavily used herbicide in the world, but we don't know how much is in our water. We don't know how much is on our food. We don't know how much is in our bodies.
Back at the farm,
I have no problem whatsoever using Roundup on my crops.
Amy Sig Davis says she has no reason to worry about Roundup.
I have no moral problem with it. I have no physiological problem with it. I know of no scientific reason to have a concern.